Hello, we are live. Welcome, everybody. My name is Melanie Dizon. I'm the Director of Education and Content at the Davis Finney Foundation, and I am here with Christopher Lyon. How you doing, Christopher?
Hey, Mel, I'm great. Great to be here. Thanks for having me today.
Good. So glad to have you. We've obviously crossed paths through our work at the foundation and your work with people at the foundation. And for those in our audience who are not super familiar with you, I'd love to hear a little bit about, let's just go quickly sort of who you are and what you're doing now, and then we're going to go all the way back.
Sure. My name is Christopher Lyon, and let's see. In terms of Parkinson's, I was also diagnosed with Parkinson's coming up on 5 years ago now. And, what can I say? DBS was just a little over, coming up on 2 months.
Wow.
And that's been going well. But otherwise, I guess I would say that my main, connection, or maybe the way that many people, including email, would know me, is in connection with the Quiver, which is a nonprofit that I started. I guess it's been about 3 years ago. And it is a nonprofit that's focused specifically on the arts, meaning painting, poetry, photography, song lyrics, any sort of form of artistic expression that can be sort of effectively communicated, transmitted over the web. Then we're all about that. So, yeah.
Love it. I'm going to pull that up. So let me grab it here. There we go. Yeah, so here's the gallery. Pretty sweet. Lots of different types of art. And I want to really talk about that creative piece and how that kind of came into your life. Let's talk a little bit about what were you doing pre-Parkinson's? What was your life like? And then what was the diagnosis process specifically like?
Well, let's see. So in terms of what was I doing? Well, I had a career. Actually, at that time, my wife and I together we owned a wealth management and financial planning practice here in Austin. And it's been there's been a lot of change since then because I'm now single. I don't point any fingers, but I will just say that Parkinson's was sort of the wake up call that I needed to move on to a new phase of my life. I wasn't really happy at that time, and honestly, I don't want to put words in anybody else's mouth. I'll just leave it at that. But when I was diagnosed, for myself, I guess I would say that I'm lucky. The diagnosis is fairly straightforward. In fact, I was pretty certain myself that it was either Parkinson's or an essential tremor. And so, I had just very straightforward tremor on my right side.
And did you go to a doctor right away, or did you try to do some self-diagnosing?
No, I went to a doctor. Yeah. I mean, and actually, somehow I knew that the right place to go was to an emotion disorder specialist. And there, of course, there are several here in Austin. It was Dr. Eisor here in Austin that diagnosed me. And so straightforward. And of course, like everybody, you look back, and I did see that there were some symptoms. But even at the same time, I would say that I caught it relatively early from a clinical standpoint, even though I was having some subclinical symptoms prior to that. But in terms of based on when my clinical symptoms rose to sort of really noticeable threshold, I got into a doctor pretty quickly, was diagnosed pretty straightforward.
Yeah. And did you start on meds right away, or did you wait a while?
I did. Yeah. I mean, I think the Dr. Eisor at that time was like, our point of view is that, you give the body what it needs. He didn't really see, and I haven't really kept up, but his thing, and I guess these debates are still raging, but I guess some people feel that there's some benefit to waiting. But anyway, for myself and Dr. Eisor, I just felt, and so I just started. And so, it's been.
Yeah. What did you take?
Gosh, there were several things along the way. I didn't even remember what it was at that time.
Did it seem to have pretty quick effect for your motor symptoms, like great management?
Yes, it did. It did. And, my symptoms have always responded pretty well to medication. I guess the only thing that I found, for whatever reason, I was bumping up my dosages too rapidly, or I don't want to say too, I was doing it. I don't know how you make that, what's too much or too quickly, but I would say that I was sort of running out of headway. And so I did feel that was one of the reasons why I felt it was necessary to sort of go ahead at this sort of relatively early stage, meaning 5 years in this relatively short time frame to go forward with DBS.
So how did that first come up when you were diagnosed? Was this something that you had read about, and did your doctor bring it up, or did you say, hey, what about this?
The DBS piece of it?
Yes.
But that now I'm seeing, by the way, it's been a couple of years I've been seeing Dr. Peckham. And, there have been some bumps, particularly last year coming out of the marriage. And, Dr. Peckham's like, I think this is something you might want to take a look at. And I think that she was right. And one of the reasons, by the way, and I'll just give a sort of a shout out both to Dr. Peckham and particularly I want to mention Dr. Patel. He's a very fine neurosurgeon here in Austin. My sister actually wrote me an article about, as a reporter, I think, in Canada. This reporter mentioned that in Canada last year, there had been something like, I think it was 400 DBS procedures in all of Canada last year. He was one of them. He said, I was lucky enough to be one of 400 people that underwent DBS. This Dr. Patel, he did 75 last year alone. So he's like number 4 in the country
Wow.
in terms of the volume that he does. Infection rates are very low. And so immediately I had a lot of confidence that this was the right thing for me to do at the right time. And so really from that point on, I mean, it was just all full steam ahead. I got the confidence in the doctor and I just went with it. And I'm happy to say that the results for me have been very helpful. They nailed the placement, which is so critical. As I've come to understand, they can sort of tweak the programming post-surgery if they don't nail the placement. But if they nail the placement, everything else becomes much more straightforward and a lot easier. So they did nail the placement, and it's helped me in so many ways. And my meds are down 70% and falling. In fact, I'm a little bit, I probably did not pick the right day to do this, but actually just today I was inspired by a buddy online who's now another friend's now completely down to 0 on his meds. And so I've taken my meds down another bump this morning.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm a little bit tremoring today. So I apologize to you in the audience, but yes.
Okay.
But in my case, though, I was just going to say they did nail the placement. And
what was their target? What did they do? Which target did they do?
I'm sorry, I don't remember I don't remember the terminology.
Okay.
But it was the
STN or the GPI.
I think it's I don't want to say it because I don't want to give false information or incorrect information, but they nailed it. And, everything from like my impulse control is better. My decision-making is better. As I've already talked about, my meds are way down and falling. I would say the only thing that is really maybe worse is that maybe my balance is not quite as good.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll take this all day long. Also, I think maybe the jury's still out, my own jury inside my own head. But I think maybe my sort of coordination maybe is not, my sort of proprioception is not quite as good. My sort of where I am in space, and I'm be bumping into things a little bit more these days. But I guess as long as I keep, if I keep working out, that way I can just bounce off things. So I'll be okay.
Right. So, did you get Medtronic or Boston Scientific or Abbott?
It was Abbott.
Okay, great. And so was it just one programming session? Was it pretty much dialed in, or have you had lots?
I've had 2.
2?
But now, like I said, but then now I'm continuing on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you or already that. Of course, my neurologist has a lot more things that she can tweak in her own office. But then in my case, actually I have it right here because I was fiddling with it today. But then I have this little iPod thing.
Mm-hmm.
I actually get it upstairs. I have this iPod where the Dr. Peckham can allow me to sort of she can sort of give me my own little sandbox. And so basically I only have one parameter that I can impact, and that's the amps, microamps really. So I just tweak microamps. I'm just bumping up my microamps as I move down my medication. And so,
yeah. What was that feeling like when you walked into the office and they turned it on?
Trying to put myself in that position, I guess that really wasn't the time. I mean, I would just say it wasn't that particular moment, but I will just say that overall, my overall thing with DBS is just, again, that I just feel so lucky. I spent one night in the hospital, within that night was not an easy one, but gosh, one night in the hospital. And my life is markedly better. And I thought, what a time to live in with these kind of advances. Um, I'm dating now, coming out of that marriage, and I can go on dates, and the subject of Parkinson's will never come up. I don't hide it, of course. I'm not saying that, but I mean that it's just no longer sort of forefront in my own mind the way that it used to be, and it's not doesn't sort of raise a lot of questions right out of the gate as I'm trying to enter into a relationship with someone. So it's been a wonderful time. Getting some feedback here, Mel. I don't know if this is me that I can do.
Yeah, I had a little bit, but I'm not getting it anymore.
All right. Well, so it's just been a wonderful thing. And, let me just say one thing about it before moving on, which is that another thing I learned about DBS is that it can impact positively a lot broader range of symptoms than I first thought was possible. Things like dyskinesia, dystonia. And so for any of you that think that if you have any idea that you might be a good candidate I would just go in and talk to a neurologist about it. I think there's a lot of misconceptions, even among doctors, or even possibly, according to my neurosurgeon, even among motion disorder specialists that maybe aren't quite as current with things, that are maybe more outlying areas. I don't know, but anyway, just as we all know, you have to be your own advocate, and so I would just encourage you to be aggressive about pushing your neurologist. To see if maybe you didn't think you were a candidate, but maybe you will be, and maybe you are and you didn't know it. So just be aggressive out there. No one else is going to look after you better than you will or are, and so just check, because it's really has worked wonders for me.
Yeah, that's so true. So you were diagnosed in 2018, and you were married at the time.
Yes.
And what was that like, especially knowing hey, you are already in a tough spot with it. So
yeah.
How did that happen? And do you have kids?
Yeah, I have two kids, a 19-year-old son, 7-year-old daughter.
Okay.
It wasn't really the diagnosis that really, again, I was like, well, I was like, well, okay, I guess this is going to be my thing. And I was at that time still I'm a runner, and so I thought, and somehow immediately I started going online looking at running and Parkinson's, and it was never really. That wasn't really the dark spot. The dark spot wasn't until a couple of years later, until my wife and I actually formally separated. Those are some dark few months in there. But I was like, okay, and my wife actually in this regard was very supportive, and so that was not the tough spot. But yeah, later on, as things started to accumulate in my own life with the Parkinson's and my marriage falling apart, and really the only thing I ever wanted to be was a wife, and I wanted to be a husband and a father, and all that was sort of falling apart before my eyes. And gosh, that was a tough period. And I, when I left, and my wife was sort of at that time, she's sort of a black and white person, meaning that when we separated, we stopped communicating. So in other words, I haven't, over the past 2 years, I haven't seen her or face to face or spoken with her. And so really my feeling was that when I left the ranch that day, I had my car and a checkbook, and my kids were shell shocked, and so it was difficult. My kids didn't know, they weren't talking to me, not because they were particularly angry at me, but they couldn't handle it, and it was such a shock. Neither my ex-wife and I were very vocal. We never argued or anything. So
yeah,
this is all right after, during the COVID situation, COVID lockdown. So yeah, wow. A lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. And so were they was it you're 19 at the time, or 19 now?
19 now today, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So they were still home, and
yeah.
Wow. What did you do? How did you get, mentally to a good place?
Gosh, I got an apartment there in Georgetown. We were in Georgetown at that time, and I had no furniture, and I sort of curled up in a ball in my living room floor, and I just cried. It was tough, but and then it's just like one thing at a time. I had friends at that time, Parkinson's friends, my good buddy Bob, was so helpful to me. And you keep moving forward. I was running and I was working out a lot before and after that separation. That always was obviously very, very helpful for me. And you just kind of one thing at a time. Of course, it's also helpful that, I've lived in this Austin area for a long time, so I had friends around here, but no one could really relate, no one could understand. You just have to do it yourself. And my sister was living here in the area as well. And so that was helpful. But, also one thing that I was doing, and maybe this is a good sort of segue into the Quiver, my good buddy Alan Cole, who I think you may know, he's here in Austin, and he has his own blog called PD Wise. And so Alan encouraged me to start writing.
I wanted to talk to you about, because I love the two brothers, and just wanted to talk about the interrogator and the pursuer. So tell people what's up with that.
Well, guys, that was taking me back. I haven't looked at that one in a long time. We'll bring that up yet. So that was one of my. I was just thinking as I was walking around this morning, is that Parkinson's almost like a kaleidoscope. It's like every time you look at it, it looks a little bit differently depending where you are in your life and what you might be going through. And so that was sort of one framework that I was thinking about early on. Gosh, and I can't even, sort of this extended metaphor where the interrogator, in that case, was the interrogator is the way that Parkinson's sort of poses these very difficult questions to you about where you are in your life. And it was, and so the interrogator asks you things. So what are you going to do with the rest of your life? And how are you going to make the most of things going forward? And the pursuer is this other aspect, the more sort of, let's say, the more cruel one, let's say, where no matter what you do, the interrogator is always in your rearview mirror, and he keeps pursuing you. And so those two brothers act in conjunction. And so you're thinking kind of evolves about Parkinson's, but I will say again that Parkinson's, in terms of the interrogator, Parkinson's did ask me some very difficult questions about my own life, and Parkinson's, I think, in that way, kind of saved my life, because it got me out of a very difficult. Let's just say that it got me out of an unhappy part of my life, and so it prompted me to make some changes that needed to be made. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And so Alan sort of encouraged you to start writing, and
so Alan encouraged me to start writing. I wrote a couple of things. The other one that I like I think it's on Alan's website still, and that is maybe even more. It's one that I really look back to even now. It was an essay about Stoicism, and I sort of apply these sort of Stoic concepts to Parkinson. So I wrote those, but anyway, it's always been the case that not essays, but poetry has really more been my first love. And the story that I like to tell is when I was at Northwestern getting my MBA, I convinced the undergraduate French professor to do an independent study with me on French poetry.
Oh, wow.
And so, there I was at Kellogg, getting my MBA, and I remember talking to my MBA friends, they're like, "You're doing what? What? Who's Baudelaire? Who's, and of course, but I mean, I knew that I was doing the right thing for me, and so poetry's always been a love of mine, has been for a long, long time, and so I just started writing. I wrote some poems. One a very early one that I would encourage everyone to take a look at is the Trembling Informant, where I apply some of those Stoic concepts, and I.
Is that on yours page, or?
It's if you go to the homepage there and you pull under my name, and if you like, if we have some time, maybe I can go ahead and read that one. And so I wrote the Trembling Informant, and I had some other ideas about things that I would like to do in connection with arts. As I looked around, I didn't see that there was a whole lot. It seemed to me, from applying sort of a business framework, I felt that this connection between art and Parkinson's was pretty wide open. And so there is there are some folks in London, in the UK, and they're doing similar things. But in terms of the US, I didn't see anybody that was really sort of drawing this really sort of there's really fully sort of fleshing out this connection between art and Parkinson's in a way that I thought it could be. The other part about the Quiver too, that and I was just talking about my MBA, is I felt that the thing about the arts is that a lot of folks, I think there's this whole rich, let's say, literature of memoirs. And if you think about that as sort of an artistic form of expression, and also a lot of painters out there, a lot of people are drawn to painting, and a lot of those painters have paintings for sale online in various places. And so I thought, well, to the extent that I can, I want to be able to sort of use my own business skills to help those artists sort of cultivate new audiences for their art. So those are the various threads that I go running through my mind. So it's both sort of giving full voice to these artists and also helping them find an audience.
Yeah. I think that, I've talked to so many interesting people that really just had zero creative spark, interest, what they thought was talent or anything before Parkinson's. So it's really, really interesting how that happens. I remember talking to Mike Riley one time, and he just lived a whole life, never had done anything. And he started painting. I was like, there's no way this is coming from somebody who never painted, right? It's just pretty amazing. Wow. I'm going to pull up that.
Mike is a good friend. And if you look at like Laredo and Range, it's my epic poem written in iambic pentameter. Mike did a little portrait of Laredo.
Oh, cool.
Mike, the Laredo is sort of semi-autobiographical poem about a man named Laredo who gets diagnosed with Parkinson's.
The Trembling Informant was the one you originally said, right?
Yeah, this is the one. Yeah. So you want me to go ahead and read this one?
Yeah, I think that's great.
Okay. So here we go. The Trembling Informant. I'm just going to close this door. Excuse me for 1 second.
No problem.
It's a good thing I wore shorts, huh? The Trembling Informant. It's 30-odd months with this trembling disease. There goes my daydreams of retirement ease. An idea that I've heard that some people say, time's fleeting, have fun and live for today. With this feeble wisdom, the poets seem to agree. Life short, don't tarry, live fast, loose and free. From Marvel's winged chariot to Auden's rude glacier, it's time that's pursuing till this final erasure. While tempests fugit, they carpe the diem. They live for the moment, embrace every whim. But the contentment of Bacchus is never complete. The more food they give him, the more he will eat. The carnival horses spring, non-comprehending. It's noisy and circular, chase never ending. Are we like the horse in a race with no purpose, attending a meaningless three-winged circus? I know that there's more, but I'll tell you in fairness, this palsy of shaking gives me heightened awareness of the meaning of things, what's really important, of the truth underlying. I'm your trembling informant. It's clear to me now how misguided our thinking. Let's consider more fully and look without blinking. We've cast our net broadly, but the catch is nearby. Are you ready to hear it and truth rectify? It's not time that matters, it's with whom you spend it. Care not for the pond, but the fish that swim in it. Here's the great truth served on silver platter. It's family, it's friends, it's loved ones that matter. To all the people you hold in your heart, tell them you love them. Today you should start. In love's sacred currency, to them you should pay, and balance life's journal each loving day. To brother and sister and daughter and son, tell them you love them, tell everyone. Tell all your true feelings, leave nothing unsaid. For tomorrow, dear reader, you might wake up dead.
Wow. That's beautiful. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Ma.
So what are some of the things that have come from the Quiver? Just ideating it and then bringing it to life and showcasing so many people.
It's been such a wonderful thing. And, you're just talking, by the way, about all these stories, folks that you've encountered. Jan Sargent is a wonderful poet and artist in the UK, and Ingrid Hoff is I think she's a very interesting case, as you're just describing, where she'd never painted before, and today she's selling paintings worth thousands of dollars or every day, like let's say every week.
Wow.
And they're really incredible. And so in her case, she has got some other things going on too, but it was Parkinson's, and subsequently she also had an autoimmune disorder. She's in apparently a lot of pain, but so she was so depressed upon her diagnosis that she admitted herself in a psychiatric facility in Germany. And then as part of her treatment, while she was still there in the facility, they brought her some paints and brushes, and she started painting. And her a few days later, her husband showed up, and he said, Ingrid, where do these paintings come from? And she said, they came from me. And she's like, well, he said, I didn't know you were a painter. And she said, I didn't either. Really amazing stuff, prolific. And everything is just really spectacular. I wish I had some things to show you of hers. I have some here, but anyway, just wonderful paintings. And she
is this Ingrid Hoff, you said?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But there she is. I can show this. I just got habit from your.
You got some on there, yeah.
Yeah, I can pull them up.
And so really, if you ask her, you say Ingrid, were these? Yeah, there's one right there. She's one of the few painters that I know. If you go ahead and click on, if you click, in that case, you'll see a little bit more detail there. She's one of the few painters that I know that actually her paintings are actually about, in many cases, Parkinson's. She doesn't always paint about Parkinson's, but often.
Yeah. Wow. Very cool.
And the other one here is cool. That was quite interesting.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's beautiful. Wow. I mean, yeah, it's just really unbelievable. How can you go from nothing to something? I think about it's not similar, but it's still a story that just blows my mind every time. First of all, thank you, Powerful Parkinson, for being here. Yes, tell them you love them. Tell everyone. I love that line so much. I just remember watching the news one day, and it was around Halloween, and this guy, he was laid off. He had 3 or 4 kids, and struggling, just really struggling. And he'd never been an artist, never been just not at all.
Mm-hmm.
And he had all this time, and he started carving pumpkins, and they were the most intricate, unbelievable pieces of art I'd ever seen. And it was just truly amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about that, and I think about people with Parkinson's. I think about everybody and say, wow, how much is within us that we don't know, that we never are prompted to investigate, that we never have that moment where we have to say, a lot of us will, no matter what it is, will live this side of torture for a lot of things in our life, right? Until we are prompted, we hit rock bottom, we get diagnosed with something, and we change, right? And there's just so much. And I think that's so true for the Parkinson's community. And what I've learned for sure from this community is don't wait, and start investigating the things that bring you joy. And it's pretty amazing what happens.
Absolutely. Yeah. That is so true. And that's the pursuer, that's Parkinson's, in terms of exercise. I think that's one of the things is that, I don't think about, a lot of people like to, this is something that your old friend and a mutual friend of ours, Wayne Gilbert, talks a lot about. We have the same notion where for many, they think about this metaphor of battling Parkinson's. And I don't really think, when I agree, I think if I could put words in his mouth as well as my own. So I should probably not mess with this one because I have trouble with my own mouth. I should probably leave other people's mouths alone. But anyway,
I think you're safe in saying he really hates that metaphor.
Yeah. But because the reason why I don't like it is because if you're battling something, a disease or anything else, that thing's in front of you and it's occupying your time, it's impeding your progress, it's an impediment, and so I really don't think it's a very productive way. I think, and rather I tend to think about, Parkinson's as a pursuer. And so, and it behooves you or all of us with this disease to keep moving forward and to do our best to keep Parkinson's in the rearview mirror. And so I think that's a more helpful way to think about Parkinson's. So yeah, and anyway, and it's like my old buddy Bob Sam. He talk about a guy that is fully out there participating in the world and doing things that brings him joy. We can, he's down in Buenos Aires right now, living his best life. He doesn't speak Spanish. He's taking tango lessons. Moved to Buenos Aires, but anyway, yeah. So just participate. Just do whatever brings you joy. There's, time is fleeting, And so don't wait and just go ahead and do it. Just participate, whatever it is, just do it. So yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, as a runner, I'm a runner as well. You're a runner. That metaphor of the pursuer is perfect, right? You're just, no, you can keep reading my back. You can keep reading the back of my t-shirt, but you're not getting up here. So I know you were a runner before this, but what did your symptoms get in the way of running ever? Do they ever? And what are you doing right now, exercise-wise?
Let's see. In terms of exercise, I do run some more. Let's see. I'm not running quite as much. Well, I'm not running nearly as much as I used to. But things. I'm the kind of person. I think a lot of people talk about what's the best exercise for Parkinson's, and my thing is like just do whatever you do. Just do as long as you can do it and you're moving, then that's fine. And again, it's more about just bringing joy, bring your own, doing what brings you joy, as you said, and just keep doing that. And if that's no longer bringing you joy, then find something else. And so that's, to me, is the best exercise. So I'm not running right now, but that's okay. I mean, I did Boston last year, but it was
you're like a really good runner.
Well, I'll just say this, not out of modesty, but just because if people don't know this, they should. That there are ways. There's this para athlete program where if you can to qualify for Boston as a para athlete, of which Parkinson's is one of those, you only have to be under 6 hours.
Nice.
And so that's pretty good. And so there I was last year, and I'm in the room with all these wheelchair runners and blind runners, and sort of birth defect runners, sort of severe birth defects. Did I say blind? And so there I am with all these amazing athletes and runners. It's pretty remarkable. It's pretty inspiring to be in that room with all those folks. I wish, if I ever do it again, I'm going to be sure and get a group photo because I don't do that. And I wish they actually sent them a note out. You said you should take a group photo of all these athletes, and they said they would. We'll see. So, but I'd hoped to run. I was there as an alternate to do the it's called the Blue Ridge Relay with a group of 12. There are more of these relay races. This is a 12-person all Parkinson's team. I'm sure there'll be people in that group that we're all Parkinson's runners. I was joking that we're kind of the Parkinson's SEAL Team 6. My joke is if you ever imagine a situation where these group of Parkinson's hostages and they need to be rescued by a Parkinson's team,
right? This
would be your team, and really some amazing athletes, and really all-star athletes, and I was honored to be with them. And wonderful people. Really, that's the main thing. Is they're all just such wonderful people, and very inspiring. And all of them, if you talk about all their various accomplishments, and they all are incredible accomplishments, they won't talk about those things. They will talk about the people that they met along the way in their own journey. Some amazing stuff. And right now, I guess I would say that I'm doing a lot of group fitness because I just like that because it's like 45 minutes to an hour. There's music. There's positive.
Do you have a favorite?
There's one in town. It's called Camp Gladiator. It sounds very aggressive and all, the Gladiator, but it's not really. It's just people, men and women that are just out there. The thing that's kind of unique about their own business model, the way they do it, all their programs are all outdoors.
Oh, nice.
And so they're in parking lots and stuff, whatever, around town, around Austin. They're in other cities too. I know that I think they're pretty strong in Atlanta and elsewhere in Texas and Southeast. If you're in a warm weather area, just encourage you to check for Camp Gladiator. They're really great. Also, by the way, I really like Peloton. There's one instructor that I find in particular, I wish I could remember her name, but she's been very inspirational to me because she really talks about fitness in a way that, so if you she talks about things like, well, as you're coming on, for example, for a last set, she will never say, guys, okay, we're almost done. Just 10 more minutes and you can be out of here. She says, that's not the kind of language that she uses. She says, guys, we get to do this.
Yeah, right. You're not just struggling to get it over with.
This is not a burden. This is a pleasure. Well, I don't want to say pleasure, but let's say it's... you're
You're fortunate to be able to do it.
You're fortunate to be able to do it. And I do feel that at some level, you have to be able to drive. And not, I won't just say some pleasure from having done it, but I actually think you do have to be able to derive, ideally, you have to be able to some pleasure in the doing of it. And sure, things are going to be tough. And, gosh, I get sore like everybody else. So, but still, I am happy to be there every single time. I think it was maybe 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I was running the Austin Half Marathon here. There's Tough Hill, like mile 8 or something. I was just doing the half, and it was the tough hill. And I heard this guy nearby. He was muttering to his girlfriend. He said, "Man, this hill sucks." And so I said, "Hey, listen, none of us are going to have able use of a body. None of us are going to have use of an able body forever. You chose to be here. And why are you, you don't have any reason to be complaining." So he's like, "Oh, yes, sir. Go away, please."
Well, I think that attitude really speaks to like what you were saying earlier in terms of what's the best exercise. Well, it's the exercise you're going to do. So if you hate it and you're just trying to muscle through it, probably not going to keep doing it.
Right.
Find something you love.
Yeah. And, I guess, I kind of understand that there's kind of a misery love company. Everyone kind of likes to commiserate a little bit, but really, and so who knows, maybe that was just one little moment, but hopefully, yeah. So I've mentioned to other instructors too, like, talk about this is, guys, you only get, like he'll say something like, "Sorry guys, this is going to be our last set."
Right.
Think about it. And actually it really works to feel that way, to think that way. It actually is very effective. Another story about Bob's son, we were driving around town in his car, it was about 6 months ago. You'll never hear him say, "Chris, you just got to be positive," because that's not the kind of person he is. But instead, like, he's the kind of person where positivity emanates from him. And so we were driving around his car, and this is before he went down there to Argentina. He said, "You know what? He's like 12 years in now with Parkinson's." He's like, "You know what? Parkinson's, I got to say, Parkinson's is not as bad as I thought it was going to be." Yeah. And it is so great and so positive. But it's not him trying to be positive. That's him telling the truth. That's telling his own truth.
Yeah.
And it's so helpful to hear those things because he's sort of almost in a way, like he's like, what, 7 years ahead of me, and he's given me almost permission to feel that way too.
Yeah.
And so if I say, "You know what, Parkinson's not that bad," then maybe some people out here will hear, maybe they can carry that forward because, well, let me say, I have a teen daughter as well, and she's had some struggles, as many teens have in these days, and she's had some fibromyalgia. She went to a pain clinic, and she had fibromyalgia, and she went to this pain clinic to learn how to deal with those symptoms. And I don't really know quite how to talk about it but I don't know quite the language, or I don't recall, but it's kind of, I don't want to get maybe the false impression to say that the pain is in your head, because that's not right. But if on the other hand, all pain is in our head, right? But it's sort of if you can sort of reframe the way that you think about things, they really can become different, and you can experience that pain differently. You can sort of lay down these neural pathways in your brain that makes you experience these things differently.
Yeah.
So if you can start to think about, well, this isn't, I get to be here to do this workout. I get to think that maybe Parkinson's is not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Rather than you see a lot of people on Facebook and stuff saying, Parkinson sucks. Talk to me about how Parkinson sucks. That kind of stuff is not going to get you anywhere.
Yeah.
And trust me, I'm not this sort of, I really don't believe in that sort of toxic positivity. I'm not the kind of person who just says, you just got to be, like Bob, you will never hear me say, just be positive, because that's not what I'm saying. But on the other hand, if you can take these things you're going through and sort of reframe them in a way that maybe they're not as bad as you thought they were.
Yeah.
And so it can not only be very helpful, it can be a life-saving thing.
Yeah. And it sounds like, when Bob said that to you, you didn't just hear it, your body felt it, like everything just, you're like, oh yeah, versus like, be positive. There's a little bit of, aggro in there that is actually like pumps up the system versus this feeling of like, it's not as bad as I thought it would be. Right.
Yeah.
And when it comes to pain, this when we are in pain, a lot of times our bodies tense up, right? We're like on edge for the pain. We're like bracing for the pain. We feel the pain. I have a autoimmune that makes me a lot of pain. So, right. But when I know I can increase that pain by responding in that way, then I also know I can decrease that pain by responding in a totally different way. And so, yes, we might not be able to cure what we have, things that are degenerative and are never going away. We're not going to cure them right now anyway. But we can certainly take some steps to make it a little bit better and say, hey, it's not as bad. It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. One thing, just sort of thinking about Bob and Mike Riley and stuff, is another point I want to be sure and mention about Parkinson's is that, it's probably not productive to sort of compare diseases, but I'm just going to go ahead and do it anyway. And I don't, I'm being a little bit kind of silly when I say that, or maybe flippant is the better word there, but everybody has to walk their own path with different diseases and stuff. But let's just say it's sort of a mental model or just a way of thinking about it. I was thinking recently that, let's say that if somebody gets cancer, they have this idea that, okay, I'm going to beat it. Come on, mom, come on, you can do this. And you start to think, okay, I'm going to do this thing, and I'm going to go do chemo, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to beat cancer, and maybe they will, and maybe they won't. But the focus is the whole time, I think, let's just say again, and this is just kind of a mental model, whatever, is on the disease. But Parkinson's, as we all know, it's not curable. So instead, I had this idea that rather than thinking about the disease, I think there are many people, or let's say the people that I choose to think about, or are those that instead of thinking about the disease, they think about themselves, and they think about, what am I going to do to make my own life better? What am I going to do to make my little corner of the world better? How am I going to be a source of joy to others and to myself in the world? And I think, so that those are, and if I can again, so I think that's the kind of thing that I think Mike is a perfect example of that. I've never met so many amazing people, Mike among them. I've never met so many amazing people the last 3 or 4 years of my life as I have the whole rest of my life combined. And he'll tell you again that I wasn't like this before Parkinson's. If I just real quickly, I think it says, I don't think Mike would mind me sharing with you that, I'll say he had some very significant changes in his life post-diagnosis that wouldn't have happened otherwise. We were sitting on my sofa over there, and I was telling him about some difficulties that I was having with my daughter and the divorce and stuff. And I didn't know, we had a couple of conversations on the phone, and I put some of his artwork on the site. We weren't close, but he came down to Austin for a conference that was happening here in Austin. And we were sitting on my sofa, and I was telling him about my daughter, and he was like, and I started crying, and he started crying, and he's like, it's gonna be okay. I know it is, Mike. And those things, again, the way that Parkinson's has opened up my own heart, and again, these are stories I'm sure you've heard, but it's been a pretty amazing thing. I'm more coming at it, even as difficult as last year and 21 was. I've never felt more full of love and more able to love others, and I spent a lot of time thinking about, with climate change and all that, what does it mean to be optimistic this day and age? And I think the only way to do this, really, again, to just think about, as with anything, you have to focus on, it's a Stoic concept too. You have to think about, what can I control, and how can I, and those things that I can control, how can I make those things better? And those are the things that, again, and those are the kind of things that I think happen to some of the fortunate people that I've been blessed to meet the past few years.
Yeah. Well, when I look at your site and I click artist and I go through the names, I'm like, I recognize most of them, but what really strikes me is what you've done for them. Being able to showcase people's work in that way and make them be seen and heard and appreciated. And that is huge. And who knows if you would have done this otherwise.
No,
and it's pretty remarkable.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
For them to see that. So, and it sounds like you surrounded yourself with some pretty amazing people. Mike Allen, he's one of my favorite people in the world, and lots of other great artists and friends. And you're doing a lot of great work. So we're grateful to know you and to get to share your work with people.
Thank you. Yeah.
Is there anything I haven't asked that I should have asked?
Well, let me just say this quickly. I'll just say that if a couple things, if you're an artist out there, whether again it's poetry or it may be essays, painters, photography, song lyrics, whatever, any sort of form of artistic expression, and you would like to have an outlet, please reach out to us. Also, I would say, even if maybe if you aren't, but you have an interest in art and maybe you have some free time and you would like to contribute your own time or energy to the Quiver, we're always looking for help, and so you'd be welcome. Please just reach out through the website. And one thing I do want to mention as well is that we are about to launch a new podcast.
Oh, great.
It's just going to be called The Quiver, and we're going to have each one of us that is working on the Quiver can just sort of take some subject or take a topic or a person and just sort of run with it. So really anything that is sort of reflected on the website today will hopefully eventually it'll be touched on these podcasts that will be coming up. And we've got a great team. And so more is on the way. And so thank you for having me, Mel. And it's always my pleasure. And have a great day, everyone out there. And please reach out.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. It's thequiver.org. Thanks all. We'll see you soon. Subscribe to our channel and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Mel.